Open dialogue here on Ahlebait TV. I wish you all a warm evening and I really look forward to another episode tonight. I want to thank you all for joining. And if you do want to participate on tonight's show, the number should be at the bottom of your screen. This is a live call-in show. We have another very, very important topic tonight, and it is discussing mothers and parenting in conflict zones. And the case study that we're going to be looking at tonight in particular is in Bahrain. We have a really young, talented, amazing guest tonight, all the way from Lebanon. I'd love to welcome Sondoss Al-Asaad. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Sondoss. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate your time, especially all the way from Lebanon. We are so blessed to have you here tonight. And we also have Syed Razawi. Assalamu alaikum, Syed.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for hosting, and thank you for the sister for coming online.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you today. Sister Sondoss, you've done amazing work. I love everything that you're doing so far. MashaAllah, so young and so talented, yet you've got yourself involved in some real serious issues, and one of them is what we're going to discuss tonight. It's a really interesting topic, and we all talk about parenting, we talk about motherhood, but we've never really looked at it from this angle. I think, myself personally, especially on a platform like this. So I would like for you first, and the sisters, Sister Sondoss, to actually explain to me what is the actual issue around the parenting in conflict zones, especially, namely, in the country that we've chosen for today is Bahrain. Could you introduce the topic for us tonight, please?
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Sister, that the issue of motherhood is a great topic by itself. We are talking about parenting. We are talking about an honorable duty that God has assigned women to do, which is parenting. And when you talk about this issue in conflict zones, especially here in the Middle East, and especially in the case that I'm going to talk about today, about Bahrain, you're talking about a lot of challenges, a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties that those mothers are facing. You're not talking about a normal family life, a normal conditions. Those women face a lot of challenges, face a lot of trials, and at the end of the day, they have to face them because especially when we talk about the West Asia region, that this region is exposed to two kinds of war: the hard war and the soft war. So those mothers find themselves quite responsible to in some cases to play the two roles, the roles of the mothers and the role of the fathers, especially that those mothers, they have their husbands even in battles, even in prisons, like the case in Bahrain. And also maybe because you have to notice also the issue of the economic situation that those women find themselves obliged to play the role of the fathers, who in some cases have to work more than two jobs to have the well-being and to can afford their children a good life. So when we talk about motherhood, we talk about parenting in conflict zone. We are talking about a real challenging situation, but we notice in many cases that those mothers, despite the challenges, despite the problems, they are able to play their roles, to have this strength to be successful mothers, because they have already learned from the examples of Ahlul Bayt, the examples of Sayyidah Zainab, the example of al-Banin, the example of a lot of the wives and the mothers in the history of Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam. So despite the difficulties, they are strong women. They are capable of being part of this war. So their men are in the battles, but they are also able to show, to express their motherhood in a very special way and in a very brave way, to show those hegemonic powers that you can't weaken us. You can't weaken us from doing our divine responsibility, which is bearing children who are capable uh, of facing all the schemes of all the imperial schemes and the colonial schemes against our nation.
Thank you, Sister Sondoss. Amazing introduction, and it really has highlighted already the challenges so far. I just want to remind the viewers again that this is a live call-in show. All the opinions and all the comments are of the panelists and does not represent the channel itself. However, we do provide the platform for people like Sondoss to speak and to give their points of view, because they are actually working in these sorts of areas. So again, thank you so much for that. It's really important that we do highlight these things, because we do sort of talk about conflict, we talk about parenting and how we have to sort of like represent, you know, the Ahlebait in the times that we remember in the past. But this is actually happening now. And this is the unfortunate thing, that we always look at it as the past. And, you know, these are the kind of things that we have to think about if we're going through struggle. But these people are struggling right at this very moment, just because it's not in the mainstream media, just because it's not in the headlines. That's why we're highlighting this. And, you know, this is why we need to raise these sort of issues, so that we can understand what more is happening around and how we need to also reflect upon ourselves. I'll come back to you, Sister Sunisa. I've got so many more questions for you. But Syed, when it comes to Bahrain, why is so crucial that we discuss this, and especially about the challenges that are faced, you know, in parenting? Because we talk about it in a political term, but I like to obviously bring the social aspect in this sort of conversation, especially on these platforms and this show, so that we can actually try and relate to what's happening in our lives every day, as well as what's happening around the world. And why is Bahrain so special when it comes to raising the issues of this particular sort of country and the conflicts that's happening right now? And what do we speak about when it comes to Bahrain in this sort of like time?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before speaking about Bahrain, I would like to give a brief introduction of Muslims who started to follow Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you look at the history, we find that Muslims went through great difficulties and problems. Like if you look at the life of Fatima Zahra salawatullah alayha, she witnessed people throwing stones at her father, throwing the placenta of a camel on her father, and rubbish, and she had to migrate and leave the town and go towards Medina, and she had to go through the sufferings of travel and all this. So this all sets an example for the Muslims all over the world, that when facing such difficulties and problems, they should not give in to the atrocities and problems that they are going through, but instead they should nurture their children and the future generation in a way they become stronger. Like Imam Khomeini Rahmatullah alayh, when he was being deported from Iran during Shah's time, and one of the soldiers asked him, or one of the persons who interviewed him at that time, how do you feel and where are your supporters and soldiers? He said, my soldiers are being brought up in the laps of the mother. So this also points out that the nations who are going through trouble with the plotting and planning of the enemies of Islam, Allah's blessings are there, and they are able to become stronger and bring up a nation that is stronger and much better and much confident in bringing a revolution, bringing the changes in the society, and this is exactly what is happening in Bahrain. All these atrocities and problems and difficulties that are being created uh, in the society has become a kind of university for the future generation who, inshallah, will topple the puppets and corrupt rulers of Bahrain who are by force ruling and imposing their dictatorship on the mustad'afin of Bahrain. I'm not saying Sunni or Shia. We are all there are all Bahrainis who are suffering at the hands. If you're not part of that family and clan, you end up suffering and going through difficulties. Uh, uh, and this is the best example that other nations could learn, not only from the history of Islam, but also what is going on in Bahrain, in Palestine, in Kashmir, or elsewhere where Muslims are suffering.
Absolutely. That's why we are here very, very grateful to raise these kinds of issues and topics, which sometimes are kind of, put to one side, brushed under the carpet, or when something big happens, only for that moment, it's given its kind of headline, but it is continuous. As I say, we complain about mothers and parenting and the difficulties and the struggles and the challenges, especially living in the West. But now bringing it back to conflict zones, which is here and now in this day and age, but in another part of the world that still exists, it's important to raise and for us to sort of reflect. Sister Sondoss, when it comes to the actual challenges, you mentioned one or two of the mothers taking the role of, even, the father and, supporting and finance and economics mindset. What else are the challenges and what kind of things that needs to be done in order to help through those challenges? What are they facing and how are they actually confronting those challenges, Sister Sondoss?
Well, the Syed has just raised a good point, which is something basic in our religion, is that we see that the mainstream media is all the time accusing our societies that they are patriarchal societies and women are all the time oppressed and women are marginalized and have no roles. But when it comes to cases like Bahrain, like in Lebanon, like in Syria, in Yemen, we see that those women are playing a good role, playing a great role in the conflict that is happening. Those women have a major role when it came to Bahrain. I said that in the economic crisis, they are playing role like the case of when it comes to the issue of the U.S. sanctions against our countries. They are playing a role in maintaining the financial issues of the families, and also you're asking about the challenges. Those women, for example, we know that in Bahrain we have more than 4,000 political prisoners. Those prisoners are being incarcerated merely because they have called for freedom. They are called for basic rights. They have opposed oppression and tyrannical policies that are being practiced against them. So in those cases, the cases of the mothers, we have the mothers of political prisoners, mothers of exiled citizens who also have been exiled because they have called for freedom. They have called for better country, better conditions in their countries. We have the mothers of also the mothers and the women of those who have been have had their citizenship revoked. So we saw that those women, despite all these tribulations, they are being a real model of the Zainabi women. They have been, they have absorbed all the values that Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam has uh, uh, stressed in her. Uh, we know that Sayyida Zainab has perpetuated the uprising of Imam al Hussain. So those women are part and parcel of this uprising. Uh, they can be defeated despite the pain, despite the sacrifices they stand. We see in the case of, for example, here I mentioned the case of mothers of the three torture victims who have been executed in 2017. Mother of martyr Ali Abbas Sami'. She's a very great example of Bahraini women, a mother of a martyr who stood and said, "I have seen nothing but a beauty." She know that her son was innocent. His son had committed nothing, but he was oppressed by the Bahraini system. But she was quite proud of her son, because his son has been killed merely because he stood for a great cause. He stood against oppression. He dreamt of a free country, of a free Bahrain, of a country where no oppression, no injustice. So we see that those women uh, are playing a very great role, a major role in opposing and in facing those trials, and in also they have. We know that. This is a complete cycle. Those mothers have already in their childhood experienced this brutality. When we talk about the case of Bahrain, we are talking about a prolonged systemic brutality. We are talking about a case of oppression which has been practiced for years, since the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, since the Al Khalifa puppets have been assigned by the British colonialism in the Gulf region. So we see that those women have been already brought to play this great role, and they are also now bringing their children, their daughters, to be responsible to play the same role, which is uh, basically the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. Ahlul Bayt have taught us, as I have mentioned, Sayyida Zainab alayhi salam, the case of al-Banin, the case of Sayyida Zainab, the case of Sayyida Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. She prepared Sayyida Zainab for this great role, and those women also are preparing their daughters to be to hold this responsibility, to be the voice of the voiceless, to be to challenge all the difficulties that they are exposed to, so they can be defeated. They can be, despite all the oppression, despite the marginalization, despite, we know, when we talk about the case of Bahrain, we have a lot of examples and source of oppression. The Bahrainis are oppressed in media, they are oppressed in work, they are oppressed in education, they are oppressed in every domain, in every walk, in all of every domain. The Bahrainis, the Shia Bahrainis, are being oppressed. But despite all those trials and difficulties, those women stand bravely. uh, uh, they can't be defeated, and they know already that they are part and parcel of this journey, this mission of facing oppression, of facing tyranny, of facing the dictatorship of this time, and of every time, just like Sayyidah Zainab.
Thank you so much, Sundus. It's amazing that you've actually highlighted so many important points here raised. I want to come to you, Sayyid Rizvi. When it comes to today's day and age, we have a lot of issues, especially in the West, with mental, illnesses. The fact that we cannot handle adversity, challenges, especially when it comes to being mothers and parents. With what we are faced with today. Now, in this sort of conflict, what is it that we need to do more, that we can take away, that we can actually help ourselves in this, sort of like current climate? Because we might use that as an example, as much as we use the role models. Like I said, this is happening now, here and now. But those parents, those mothers that are actually, going through those challenges, what kind of strength does it take to actually, parent in those conflict zones? And how does that even affect their mental state? And even for their future generation, it's really important that we address this, because we live in a society right now that we have everything and we are really overwhelmed with a lot of things. And we still have, issues. And not to say that it shouldn't exist, but then what is the difference of a mindset when you are in a conflict zone and you're fighting for your life, yet you still find, some sort of meaning and purpose. You still find so much sort of like strength in sort of continuing, even in those real tragic times. What are your thoughts on this, Sayed?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we should look at the results in the West and the results in the environment where people have meaning for their struggle and people are fighting for a reason. If you look at the areas like Muslim countries, when all these conflicts and troubles take place, they end up producing people like Qasim Soleimani. And in a non-believing world where there is no faith, there is no purpose for the fight and conflict, and even if they are going as an aggressor, you see that in America, for example, in American military and in Western military sources who go and occupy these areas in the name of liberation and helping the people, when their soldiers come back, they become a mental wreck, and they cause so much problem for the Western society, and they are not even useful for the military and the future of the country anymore. So it entirely depends on the purpose and the reason of your struggle. If your struggle is meaningful, you're fighting for a cause, if you are defending your cause and you are there to oppose the oppressive rulers, Allah's blessings also come down and create people like Qasim Soleimani and many other soldiers and warriors. And this lesson have been learned by the Shia Muslims from the tragedy of Karbala. If you look at the tragedy of Karbala, you would see that how mothers were preparing their young children instead of being afraid of, worried of mental scars that would be created in their mind because of going to the battlefield. They were preparing their young children to defend the cause. They were creating the meaning of their life in their mind, and the result was great warriors who defended Islam and promoted Islam and spread Islam all over the world. In other cases, who do not fight for a cause and reason become mental wrecks.
Absolutely. I love what you said, and I'm glad that you highlighted that, because I did want to raise awareness with regards to this, because we do have a lot of issues in our community here in the West, and a lot of it is stemmed from labeling yourselves in a particular form. And I'm trying to study more around this, and that's why it's important to highlight that to have meaning and purpose in life means that your challenges are not taken away, your adversity is not going to go away, but the fact that you have the strength to overcome this, because you actually do know the reason and find reason and meaning, like our Said has so wonderfully mentioned and perfectly said, and that's what gives you the reason to continue with your cause. And I think it's something that we all need to reflect on a little bit more. Sister Sundas, when it comes to the actual threat of the values of those parents and the entity that threatens the values of the parents that are in conflict zones, could you highlight some of that and give us some light on what is from your findings through your research and studies?
Okay, sister, when we talk about the case of Bahrain, we know that the Bahrainis right now are challenged by two main issues. The first is the political naturalization, and the other is the recent normalization ties between the Bahraini regime and the Zionist entity. First of all, I'm going to talk about the political naturalization, which is highly critical, especially in a conservative community like the Bahraini community. The Bahraini regime is naturalizing mercenaries from all around the world, especially from Asia, and those who are naturalized are being brought to Bahrain. They have very different values and very different mentalities. So those alone are threatening the mindset and the values of the families. And you know that this is very crucial, and the Bahrain regime is systematically playing on this issue in order to, I've mentioned in the very beginning the issue of the soft war. Once you fail to upset the communities, you try different ways, such as the methods of the soft war, by changing the values of the family, by changing the values of those societies. The other issue is the normalization of ties between the Zionist entity. You know that the Bahraini regime has normalized ties with the Zionists without even consulting the people. The vast majority of the Bahrainis reject normalizing ties with this apartheid regime, which is a threat not only for the Palestinians but also for the whole Muslim community, but not also but for the for the whole humanity. So the regime is systemically trying to change the values of the community by bringing new values which are totally odd to this to the Bahraini community. But because, Alhamdulillah, because of the teaching of Ahlul Bayt, this community is still strong, is still able to challenge those values, those differing values, which because of the teaching of Ahlul Bayt, because the Bahraini community has learned from the teaching of Ahlul Bayt how to face oppression, how to face uh, every values that contradicts the values of the genuine Islamic Muhammadian religion, a religion which is stressed on opposing brutality and opposing all kinds and all sorts and all methods of oppression and dictatorship. So the challenge is real. Those mothers and those women are really in a very critical position. They are holding a great responsibility, but they are able to face those challenges because unfortunately the West, the mainstream media, have always failed to uh, to, uh, to 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 know that our society can be defeated because we are because we are communities who hold great values from the Islamic Muhammadian teachings, which makes us uh, courageous, and which makes us brave and all the time ready to face to face all difficulties. We see, I have mentioned that we have the examples of the mothers of the political prisoners, prisoners of conscience, the mothers of the exiled, exiled, the mothers of the we have said because that the regime has fired a lot of Shias from their jobs. So we have a lot of examples of mothers facing so many difficulties, but they are courageous. They are able to face those challenges because they strongly believe that in their cause, in the justice of their cause, and they will continue on this mission of facing oppression, and in demanding their basic natural rights, the rights that are should be guaranteed by all, by the constitution of Bahrain, by all the international laws and charters. But unfortunately, the government of Bahrain no one deals with the Shia citizens as second class citizens, and try all the time to oppress them. But Alhamdulillah, those women are being able to face this sort of systemic oppression because they have learned these values from the school of Ahlebait, from the school of Sayyida Zainab and Sayyida Fatima al-Zahra.
I think sister is, yeah, we have lost sister. Sister, you can continue if you have any more points about Bahrain.
Yeah, so the women of Bahrain are exemplary in this domain, in facing brutality, in facing all sorts of brutality. They are changing, and they are challenging all uh, the trials that are being imposed upon them.
I
We
apologize for
lost you
my
for a
weak
while, sister.
connection tonight, but I am back. So, inshallah, I have heard most of what you've said. I do appreciate your time so far, Sister Sundus, explaining all of this. I know you're in Lebanon, but you have better connection than me tonight. I don't know what happened. The thing is, what I want to continue just quickly asking you, when you said that there has been a change of values, what exactly is the change, and how can we overcome this? I think that you can definitely highlight a few more aspects. Like, give me some examples of what are the actual changes that are being made in order to make it more difficult and make it more challenging for our parents and that are in these conflict zones.
So unfortunately, the mainstream media and the West in general uh, has failed to understand that the more difficulties those women are exposed to, the more courageous they become. They have failed to make our societies a vulnerable societies uh, when being oppressed, they thought that their oppression makes us vulnerable and makes us defeated. But the more the oppression, the more we are responsible, the more we are ready to challenge, the more we are ready to fight for our cause, because our cause is just, because our cause is because we know that we are the oppressed. This land is ours. This the we understand that the schemes of the colonizer, the schemes of the West, that is trying uh, to to take control over our wealth, over our land, over our riches. But because we know, we well understand, we well perceive the schemes of our enemies. We are we are ready to sacrifice whatever, our sons, our money, our everything, in order to face these tribulations. And at the end of the day, just as the Syed has said at the very beginning, that the Shah in Iran uh, uh, was defeated because the Iranians was brave enough to fight for their cause, because they was brave enough to understand that they understand their cause, and to because they have been ruled by Imam al-Khomeini Ridwanullah ta'ala alayh. The case is the same in Bahrain. The Bahrainis, we know that now. Meanwhile, the top opposition leader, Sheikh Ali Salman, who represent a majority of the Bahrainis, Sheikh Ali Salman is an example in his peaceful opposition against the government. The government has failed to silence him, so at the end they have incarcerated him on false charges of Qatar, but we know that these charges are just being brought against him just to silence him. But despite this, we see that the wife of Sheikh Ali Salman is a very brave woman. She stand and she talk about the case of her husband. She stand and she's continuing. Now her husband is behind bars, but she's continuing raising the issue of her country, raising the in many places, in many on different platforms, uh, because she perceived that when her husband is absent, she has to complete his mission. So we have a lot of examples here. I also mentioned the case of the mothers of two martyrs, martyr Mustafa and Muhammad Hamdan. She is a brave woman. She is a brave woman. Her sons were killed merely because they was. We know also the case of Ayatullah Shaykh Isa Qasim, who was stripped of his nationality on arbitrarily stripped of his nationality. So the Bahrainis then arranged a peaceful sit-in to defend him, but the brutal Bahraini government has cracked down on this peaceful sit-in. The sons, the martyrs, Muhammad Hamdan and Mustafa Hamdan, martyred and was killed by the brutal Bahraini police merely because they was defending the faqih. But their mother was very proud of them, because she perceived that her sons were defending a great cause, were defending the cause, not a personal issue of Sheikh Isa Qasim exclusively, but it's a case of, we are talking here about the existence of the Shia in Bahrain. The Bahraini government is fighting the Shia existence, which we know that the Shias of Bahrain are are the are have been fined in Bahrain since a long time, and the government is trying in all ways to fight them and to weaken them. But because those women perceive that, perceive the dirty hostile policy of the government, they are brave enough to teach their children their just cause, and they are ready to sacrifice their children in order to defend this just cause, and in order to fight for the freedom of their country against the brutality of Al Khalifa.
Thank you so much, Sister Sondoss. It's been an absolute pleasure. I do apologize for any of the disruption. Really appreciate your work, your time, and
Thank you
inshallah
for
we hope to
having
have you
me.
again. I hope you can do your work. It's my pleasure, honestly. And you've highlighted so much, you've given us so much insights and awareness. Inshallah, you continue successfully with your work. Thank you so much, Sayed. Thank you
Thank
everyone for
you very much.
watching, and inshallah, you're
Thank you.
welcome. Inshallah.